Okay, so how lovely to have these moments to be with you with this precious consideration. I felt like starting by saying it's an honor to be a part of this pioneering work, bringing whole beingness into the world. I feel the impact of it on my students every day, and I've had the interesting time recently of working with a group of people or individuals, some individuals from a group who've come out of a very traditional spiritual form. And so I've just been sensitized to the contrast of what we're offering and what they experienced. And I'm feeling very attuned in my own way to what we're offering here and the magic of it in the context of our evolving world. Whole beingness, in my view, is this new frontier that we're stepping into. And it looks like us. It looks like our community, our teacherhood, our individuality, our discovery of these edges, our holding the tough periods while we continue to evolve personally and collectively. I've also found myself working with my students, hearing about this particular guru and discovering his nature through their words and discovering his humanness beyond what he was sharing with his students overtly, but what kind of came through his pores, even though he wasn't expressing it. So, and I've noticed something showing up for me recently that I'm beginning to sense that in some of the other icons of spirituality of this century and earlier centuries, that I'm noticing the moments when they were feeling personally uncomfortable with themselves. I'm noticing the moments when they felt a sort of codependent dynamic with their students. When I notice when they're more in their spiritual persona, and I notice when their eyes, if I'm watching a video or looking at a photo, are not fully on board with that transcendent dimension of them that they're expressing. So their personal nature has a certain dissonance with the enlightenment that they're offering, which is no less true in that transcendent dimension, but is not yet whole being. And it seems shocking to say of someone like Ramana Maharshi, who I've spent some time with recently, that maybe he didn't feel good about his personal self, but I've seen these moments. So nothing taken away from the beauty of that realization, but noticing not just in each of my students or in myself, but these places that are still evolving. So for centuries, we were in a way stuck with the dilemma of two that somehow couldn't be reconciled. Now we can call that spirit and matter, or consciousness and form, or body, and awareness. But we're all familiar with this dilemma of two, and how there seems to be no path from consciousness to form that doesn't encounter a paradox. And I think we're still grasping that. It's never not been true that we can't actually derive form from consciousness or consciousness from form, and we can't reduce form to consciousness. It's tempting to say everything is consciousness. It's tempting to say that consciousness just kind of vibrates out and we get form. But each time we do this, and each time I've explored it, and it's been a long exploration for me, including my dissertation work 20 years ago, we meet this impasse, this paradox. And for the first time, in human understanding, we're able to, in this community, and maybe others around the planet, I haven't come across too many, to hold that paradox rather than find some other way around it. So while I was contemplating this talk, the words from the Heart Sutra popped into my head, and I wanted to share them with you. So let me see if I can bring them up on my screen. Yeah. Interesting, the name of this sutra, and we might come back to that. Yeah. The full name is the Heart of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, one of the great Mahayana teachings. And in a way, most of us would be familiar with it. But I'm just going to take the lines that we really know well. Form is empty, or emptiness, sometimes translated. Emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is not other than emptiness. So here we have form and emptiness identified. Yeah? And this beautiful, beautiful quotation that has meant so much to so many people, that speaks in many ways to the no self-realization. Yeah? It's both announcing the paradox, it's identifying form, making form and consciousness the same, and it's unknowingly collapsing the paradox. It's not both and, it's not consciousness and form holding them both. It's equating them, collapsing the paradox, but also announcing something. And of course, the punchline is that all created things are void. So even though the form and emptiness are equated here, the conclusion is on the side of everything is empty. Yeah? Everything is empty. So somehow we fell through this history of spirituality on one side or the other. Yeah? Either we were in consciousness and materiality was illusion, or we were on the other side and we were all in materiality and we dismissed the unseen or the difficult to perceive. Yeah. Or consciousness is an epiphenomenon of the brain. But now, in this whole being era, something new becomes available. Yeah. Because there's a third ingredient. There's a third ingredient. Here we have emptiness, which is the no self form of consciousness, form or body. But here we have the third. And the third ingredient is the one that we're considering today, which I like to call love mutuality. Yeah, it's a kind of presumption to say that, but love-mutuality. And what we're discovering in this era is that consciousness and form meet in the heart. They meet in the heart. And without the three, we were perplexed, we were confused, we were identifying, we were collapsing the paradox. But now we have the three, and now that we recognize that they meet in the heart, we can move forward in this era of whole being evolution through our realization and beyond, as Rod took us today. So what I want to show you is that how we can feel this in our own nature, that in one hand, I can hold the infinite, consciousness, the infinite, whatever term we might want to find. In the other hand, my finite nature, my body, these forms, this universe, this manifest space. And what links these two is right here in the center, yeah? This triangle between the three, consciousness, body or form, and the heart. This self, which feels the relationship, which is in a way the feeling of the relationship of consciousness and form. So mutuality, it's a lovely thing to practice with each other, and it's the bombshell, yeah, that brings the three to life. And it's the doorway, as Rod was saying, into this realization. And I see this over and over again with my students and in my groups. So what's it like to come into whole beingness and wake up to everything, yeah? Which for me includes the history of the cosmos back to the Big Bang. It includes everything going on the planet. It includes everything I've lived since I was born. It includes remembering when my umbilical cord was cut. Yeah? It includes every detail, because the universe that we are awakening to, the manifest universe, is like the Akashic records, and it actually all belongs to me and to us, because we are made of that same stuff of the Big Bang, and we can know that in ourselves, and we know it coming through the doorway of love mutuality and down, if it's down, into the form, and then out into all forms. And it's bumpy, because as we take in everything that we've lived and everything that's ever been lived, yeah, it's digestion, and the digesting of experience, especially experiences that were not able to be digested earlier, is something that happens in the cells, in the body. I relate it to the stages of grief that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross brilliantly noticed. And ultimately, when we reach acceptance, that's when it's digested, it's integrated, and it's actually then consciously part of our form. We are consciously embodied there, where before there was something that was dark, like a dark mass that was not yet clear. So here we have the magic of three. And remarkably, right in our community here, we have a world's first. Yeah. We have a map of whole being evolution that charts in these beautiful vectors each dimension of evolution from source, from the very origin to source, yeah, through every step and every stage. I haven't seen anything anywhere that does the same thing, whole beingness on the map. Now, you may not relate to this particular map, but the very form of this map is a breakthrough for humankind, yeah? And we, in this community, are the custodians of this opening, this portal into the next age, you could say, whole beingness. So maybe it doesn't look this way to you. Well, it's interesting. If we look at the map, we can notice, and Rod showed us, some of the characteristics or the elements that emerge in that mutuality vector, in that relatedness vector. And one of the ones that shows up in pre-awakening, prior to the whole being realization, in that mutuality, that right-hand dimension, that channel. I could actually show you it in the chart if you like. Let me see if I can bring it up here. So in the individuation phase, let's bring it in nice and close. On that right-hand side, we have a little characteristic called codependence. Yeah. Now, codependence is a funny old word. I'm just going to get rid of that. We don't really need it anymore because it has this awkward history in 12-step work, and it sounds like a pathology, and it sounds like being enmeshed in a certain way with people, and we can go to Codependence Anonymous and so on. But actually, codependence is a characteristic of how we are in relationship during a certain stage of life, during the individuation phase that could be, for humankind, hundreds and hundreds of years, of individuating, of coming out of immersion, being immersed, non-individuated, into a clarified boundary of myself. And so it's a great achievement to come from immersion into codependence, which means that I'm in this dance of relationship with others. And I would say that for many years after the whole being realization, we are outgrowing, discovering first, actually, the layers of this codependent quality and outgrowing it little by little, little by little, little by little. And often what we call shadow, and we think, oh my goodness, what's this going on with this person, is part of this relational social dynamic that we can call codependent. Yeah? And it has a number of features, but the one I want to focus on is that codependence says, I might even have a slide for this somewhere. Maybe I'll just have the words. Oh, here we go. Nice. I need you to be a certain way for me to be okay in myself. It's a strange way to live, but it's how we live because we're coming into relationality from being immersed in a way, or non-individuated into individuation, and it's part of the dance. So it's not a mistake, it's not wrong, it's not a pathology, even though we often pathologize it. And we can go, I need you to be a certain way, or I need life to be a certain way, or my finances to be a certain way, or Trillium awakening to be a certain way, or my body to be a certain way, yeah, for me to be okay in myself. So my wellness is growing in my realization, but I'm still discovering all these places where I'm sort of bound into these expectations, these agendas with others. Yeah? And what's interesting, I can actually flip this around, my okayness in myself depends in this, let's say, take the instance of an interpersonal relationship. My okayness in myself depends on you thinking, acting, feeling, or deciding a certain way. Yeah. So if my okayness kind of requires something from you, and I'm not conscious of that, I might start to press. I might start to pressure you to be a certain way that'll help me feel better. Yeah. So, and in a way, that's actually pointing, if we look at the charts, we can see that, to where we still need to meet to become conscious in our core, in that core condition that we talk about in this work. Yeah? So I need you to be a certain way. If we look at social media, for example, great illustration, we see this dynamic. I haven't quantified it, but I would say maybe 97% of social media, people's posts have an expectation of the other, of others, whether it's for likes, yeah, thank you, or for other aspects of interaction, or there's a pressuring. You know, I watched this last year with the US election. You know, I watched some of my friends posting and they were pressing. And even now with the virus, you know, vaccination, don't vaccinate, there's all this pressing. And not only that, these objective news items are written by reporters and I can feel their agenda coming out to me. It doesn't personally offend me because I kind of feel okay, but I feel them pressing in a way. They want me to do the right thing from their perspective, and their news story is now a pretext for giving me an argument for why I should do what they think I should do. Yeah. So we're in this global, complex, codependent interaction. And in it, even when we think we're a pluralist, we can be making war on the difference of the other. But it turns out this is another who can never be reduced to the same, who can never be reduced to me or to some ideal. Yeah. All right. So I have a series of instances that I'm not going to look at where I itemize where this shows up in particular teachers, including Marshall Rosenberg. I had an experience with him at a retreat which revealed this dimension of codependence as yet unconscious. Not a mistake, not to make him wrong, but just to notice how this is still being discovered and opened and transformed for all of us. None of us are better than this process. And I would say maybe there's a decade or more when this continues to show up. So I'm just going to offer a little model that I developed to consider this. So some of you have heard me describe this CMI-CPE, yeah? And it keeps expanding: controlling, managing, influencing, convincing, persuading, educating. And I've also got now advocating, correcting, and a number of others. These are all indications. Now, none of these are intrinsically wrong, but when they come with a certain pressure for the other to be different, for their difference to be different, for their difference to be more like what we think, you know, our sameness. Yeah? And it's a subtle leaning in. And I've noticed in my own personal relationship that as I surrender into and relax out of this tendency, something very new shows up. And it shows up in other contexts in my life too, including the groups I work with and so on. What happens then is this flow of love, flow of, I mean, you could see this as a feedback flow, yeah? There's just this movement of life folding in on itself into the center and swirling, yeah? And it just seems to arise all the more as I'm just easing my way through and out of this pressing against what is and this softening into what is, not giving myself up in the process, quite the opposite, becoming more my nature, all the more because I've also realized the other. Samuel talked about self-realization and other realization, yeah? So this is the pioneering edge we're at. Thank you for listening. And I'm very grateful that you could give me your ear for this little bit of time. And if there's any thoughts, please bring them to the conversation that we can have after lunch.
Yeah, really beautiful, Ralph. Really, yeah. I mean, that pressing really, bringing that awareness to how we press with each other. That's, yeah, beautiful. Okay, so thank you.